Rain slammed into Lena like it had been waiting for her, following her down the street with a relentless force that made every step heavier. The city lights blurred in the downpour, stretching into streaks of color she could no longer distinguish. Her hair clung to her cheeks, dripping into her collar, and her backpack, her last possession of value, felt twice its weight, pulling at her shoulders. She kept walking because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering the moment everything fell apart. Just an hour earlier, she'd walked into her apartment expecting nothing more than a quiet evening and maybe a cup of cheap tea. Instead, the landlord stood in the kitchen with her arms crossed, a folded paper in her hand, and an expression Lena had seen only once, when she told another tenant to leave. "We need to talk," she'd said, her voice cold but rehearsed. Lena didn't even get to set her keys down before the words came. "Your roommate left. I know she's been away a lot, but..." "She moved out," the landlord cut in. "Without notice. And you're responsible for the full rent." Lena felt the floor shift under her feet. "But that's double what I pay." "I can't. You have 5 minutes to collect your things." 5 minutes. As if her entire life could be folded in half and shoved into a single bag. As if she weren't a person but an inconvenience to be swept out before dinner. Lena remembered fumbling, tripping over her own shoes, throwing clothes into her backpack with shaking hands. She left behind things she cared about. A mug from her mother, a sketchbook filled with her drawings, because there simply wasn't time. She didn't even get her coat. The landlord stood at the door the whole time, tapping her foot, already planning how quickly she could list the room again. The door slammed behind her, and Lena stood in the hallway alone, staring at a space that no longer belonged to her. Now the storm felt like an extension of that moment, a final cruel shove from a world that had stopped making space for her. Lightning cracked overhead, illuminating the empty street with a flash so bright she flinched. The thunder followed instantly, a violent sound that seemed to erupt inside her chest. She wrapped her arms around herself, her thin jacket useless against the cold. Water seeped into the fabric until it felt like ice against her skin. "Just get through tonight," she muttered. But she didn't know where through was. A car sped past, splashing her with freezing water from a deep puddle. The shock made her gasp, and for a moment she stopped walking, overwhelmed. She blinked back tears, though no one could tell the difference. Rain had a funny way of hiding sadness, something she was oddly grateful for. She crossed the street, her shoes slipping slightly on the pavement. Every few steps, the wind shoved her sideways, making her weightless, powerless, like a leaf caught in a current. Her breath trembled each time she tried to steady herself. People hurried past, faces tucked into scarves, umbrellas tilted forward, determined not to look at anyone around them. One man brushed her shoulder and kept going without a word. A woman stepped around her, grimacing as though Lena were part of the storm itself, something wet and bothersome. She wasn't used to being noticed. But she wasn't used to being invisible either. She pushed on until a violent gust nearly pulled her into the road. She stumbled toward a metal railing, clutching it like it was the only thing holding her upright. The storm roared, drowning out everything else, cars, footsteps, even her own breathing. Another clap of thunder rolled across the sky, and something inside her cracked with it. Her body sagged under the weight of exhaustion. She pressed her forehead to the cold metal railing and closed her eyes. That was when she heard it. "Hey, stop." The voice was sharp but not harsh, urgent but not angry. It cut through the storm in a way nothing else had. Lena turned her head slightly, squinting through the rain. A black SUV had stopped in the middle of the street, its headlights bright against the darkened city. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. He wasn't holding an umbrella at first, he just looked at her with alarm as the rain soaked him instantly. Only when he realized how drenched she already was did he grab one from inside. He moved toward her, the umbrella tilted above them both, though she hadn't moved an inch. "Are you all right?" he called out over the storm. Lena stiffened. A stranger noticing her was unusual. A stranger stopping for her. That didn't happen. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice cracked almost immediately. She wished she sounded stronger. More believable. He stepped closer, and she could see him more clearly now. Dark hair plastered to his forehead, a jawline sharp enough to seem sculpted, and eyes that searched her face with an intensity that made her stomach twist. Even drenched, he carried himself with a kind of composed authority she couldn't place. "Fine, usually means the opposite," he replied. His voice softened, but the concern in it only deepened. Lena backed up a step. "I don't need help." He paused, studying her like someone who didn't believe what he was being told. Not because he doubted her integrity, but because he could see the truth she was trying to hide. "Look," he said gently, "the storm's getting worse. Let me take you somewhere safe." She swallowed hard. "I don't have anywhere to go." The words slipped out before she could bite them back. They hung in the air, fragile and humiliating. His expression changed, not pity. She could handle pity. This was something else. Something warmer, deeper, like a quiet promise. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lena." He nodded once, as though committing it to memory. "I'm Adrian." The storm surged again, wind whipping so fiercely that Lena staggered forward. Adrian reached out instinctively, catching her arm just enough to steady her without overstepping. His hand was warm, shockingly warm compared to the icy rain. "You're freezing," he murmured, frowning. "I'll be okay," she whispered. He didn't look convinced. Thunder boomed overhead, and she flinched violently. Adrian's jaw tightened. "Lena," he said firmly, "come with me." She blinked. "Why?" "Because no one should be alone like this," he answered, "especially not tonight." Her throat tightened. She wanted to step back, protect herself, keep the distance she had learned to maintain with strangers. But she couldn't make herself move. Rain dripped from her eyelashes. Her fingers shook. And then he said it, quietly, but with absolute certainty. "Come home with me, just until you're safe." The words didn't feel like a command or a rescue or a charity gesture. They felt like someone seeing her, really seeing her, for the first time in a long time. Her voice, when it finally came, was barely a breath. "Okay." Adrian exhaled softly, as if he'd been waiting for her answer far more intensely than he let on. He stepped closer, angling the umbrella fully over her now, shielding her from the storm. For the first time all night, Lena felt something like warmth seep through the cracks in her fear. And as he guided her toward the SUV, she realized she had no idea who he was. But for the first time in hours, she also wasn't afraid of the storm. The warmth hit her the moment she stepped through the doorway, not just physical warmth, but the kind that came from soft lights, clean air, and a space where nothing felt rushed or cruel. Lena stood frozen just inside the entrance of Adrian's home, her dripping clothes forming a small puddle on the polished wooden floor. She tried not to move, afraid she'd stain something, break something, ruin something. Houses like this weren't meant for people like her. "Don't worry about the floor," Adrian said, shutting the door behind them. "It's just water." He spoke calmly, but there was an undercurrent of something else there, an awareness of how tightly she held herself, how she tried to take up as little space as possible. He placed the umbrella aside and stepped into the hallway, unbuttoning his soaked shirt sleeves. "I'll get you a towel," he added before disappearing down the corridor. Lena stood alone, shivering. The house was quiet. Too quiet. No raised voices, no neighbors arguing behind thin walls, no noise from the street. Just the soft hum of an unseen heater and the faint scent of something, cedar, she thought, woven into the air. Her fingers twitched at her sides. She didn't know where to look. Every piece of furniture looked too expensive to stare at for too long. Adrian returned with a thick white towel, handing it to her without a word. She murmured a soft thank you and wrapped it around herself. The moment the fabric touched her skin, the cold she'd been holding back flooded out in a slow, painful wave. Her shoulders loosened slightly, though she didn't notice. "You're soaked through," he said. "Let me get you something dry to change into." Before she could protest, he was gone again. She heard him open a drawer, the quiet thud of closet doors, the faint rustle of fabric. She looked down at her shoes, muddy, wet, pitiful against the sleek wooden floor. She slipped out of them and placed them neatly by the door, the only gesture she could make to avoid feeling like an intruder. Adrian returned with a soft gray sweater and a pair of sweatpants, the kind that looked like they had never known discomfort. "These should fit well enough," he said, holding them out. "I can't wear your clothes," she said quickly, clutching the towel tighter. "You can," he replied gently. "And you should. You'll get sick staying in those." There was no force in his tone, no insistence masked by politeness. Just quiet logic and concern. She lowered her gaze and nodded, taking the clothes. "The bathroom is right there," he added, gesturing down the hall. "Take your time." Lena walked slowly, each step careful, as if she were afraid the floor might vanish beneath her. Inside the bathroom, she locked the door and exhaled for the first time since arriving. The space was beautiful, marble tiles, soft lighting, fluffy towels stacked neatly. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. Wet hair stuck to her face, mascara smudged under her eyes, cheeks pale. She looked like someone who didn't belong here. She changed quickly, her cold skin tingling against the warm fabric. Admittedly, the clothes were too big, but they were soft, comforting. For a moment, she allowed herself to close her eyes and breathe deeply. It felt like safety. She couldn't remember the last time she felt that. When she stepped back into the hallway, Adrian was waiting in the living room, his hair towel dried, wearing fresh clothes of his own. He stood when he saw her, as if she were someone important. "You look warmer already," he said with a small smile. She tugged at the sleeves of the sweater nervously. "Thank you, for all this. You really didn't have to." "I know," he said quietly, "but I wanted to." That answer made something in her chest tighten. She glanced around the room, tall bookshelves, a fireplace flickering with a soft flame, large windows overlooking a garden blurred by rain. Everything looked untouched, not empty but unshared. "Do you live here alone?" she asked, surprising herself. Adrian hesitated for a second before answering. "Yes." The way he said it wasn't casual. There was a hint of loneliness in it, subtle but unmistakable. She wondered how someone like him, clearly successful, obviously wealthy, could look so isolated. He gestured toward the couch. "Sit, please." She perched at the edge of it, unsure how relaxed he expected her to be. He sat across from her, not too close, giving her space but keeping his attention on her. "Do you want tea, or something warm to drink?" he asked. Her stomach answered for her with a small, embarrassing twist. She pulled the towel tighter over her lap. "Tea is fine." He rose without another word and walked into the kitchen. The soft clinking of cups and the hiss of boiling water drifted into the living room. Lena stared at the fire, watching the flames shift and curl. Heat gradually spread through her limbs, making her feel more human. After a few minutes, Adrian returned with 2 steaming mugs. "Here," he said, handing one to her. She wrapped her hands around it, grateful for the warmth. He watched her take a sip, waiting until she relaxed slightly before he spoke again. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" She froze. The truth was too raw, too fresh. But something about Adrian, his quiet patience, his steady presence, made lying feel pointless. "My landlord kicked me out," she said softly. "My roommate moved out without telling me, and I couldn't pay the full rent." He frowned, setting his own mug down. "She just threw you out? Like that?" Lena nodded. "I didn't have time to pack anything properly. And then the storm hit." He leaned back, jaw tightening with restrained anger. Not at her, she realized, but for her. "That's unforgivable," he muttered. Then, more gently, "How long have you been on your own?" She shrugged. "A long time." He studied her for a moment. "You shouldn't have had to walk through that storm alone." "No one would have stopped," she said quietly. "I did." The words hung between them like a new kind of warmth, unexpected, steady, impossible to ignore. Lena lowered her gaze. "I still don't understand why." He inhaled slowly, as if choosing his words with care. "Maybe because I know what it feels like to be alone at the worst possible moment." His voice softened. "And maybe because, when I saw you out there tonight, something in me wouldn't let me drive away." The admission was gentle but heavy, carrying meaning she didn't know how to accept. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. The fire crackled, the rain outside softened, and for the first time that night, Lena's heartbeat wasn't frantic, scared, or hollow. It was calm. Adrian took a sip of tea, then looked at her with a quiet certainty. "Stay here tonight. There's a guest room. You'll be safe." The word safe hit her deeper than she expected. Safety wasn't something she thought she'd earn again. "Just tonight," she whispered back, needing to say it for her own protection. "Just tonight," he echoed, though the look in his eyes said he hoped for more. And Lena, holding a warm mug in clothes that didn't belong to her, in a house she would have never entered under any other circumstance, realized something she hadn't felt in a long time. Tonight, she wasn't alone.